Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover This Face Off SE! And in this April special edition, we're doing a best of the rest, and checking out the magazines that were missed the first time around. And in this slightly different episode, we get to see two CD32 Gamers, some CU Amigas, an Amiga Format, an Amiga Mania, a 1 for the Amiga, and a 0. Fight! Now we'll start in 1992, and the first magazine is Zero, which was still a multi-format magazine this late in the day, and it also had demos for both the Amiga and Atari, but interestingly, they were different for each machine. But just looking at the Amiga, we get Agony. This is the second time we've seen a demo for this game, but thankfully this time it's a different level. It's still much later into the game, but it's balanced out by our owl having been upgraded, so we get the twin swords and a decent sized attack from the start. Now this is obviously an amazing looking game, with so much going on in the background. But it is a bit of a shame that due to all of that, the enemies get stuck with having such a small number of colours, so they all look a little basic and can blend in with that background. But you really can't go wrong with such an action-packed fun game and decent demo. We also get the PD game Klondike, or as it's also known as Solitaire, the card stacking game that's great for burning a few minutes as you slowly come to the realization that you're not going to be able to complete it this time. But somehow, it's still fun anyway, and you'll keep coming back. Now this is a decent looking version that plays well as any other that I've played over the years. So if you want to play Solitaire on the Amiga, then you really can't go too far wrong with this one. And sticking with 1992, we get CU Amiga, that was in full swing with its 2 discs with a nice mix of items, and it kicks off with their typical Picture of the Month and Tune of the Month. The software is Sample Maker 1.0, a program for generating samples, but once you've saved it, you're not going to be able to edit it again. It's not for that. This is just for those that don't have an audio sampler, but still want to make unique samples for their music. Just configure the UI how you want it, and then get it to generate something that you can then drop into your mod program. And if you have any musical talent at all, then you'll be able to spot when something would sound good in a track, or be able to work out exactly how to make something that will be interesting. For me, that's not the case. Also included was an older version of Sysinfo, the program we all like to use to see how much faster our Amigas are when they're upgraded. And you can see the bones of what we would later come to see, with its very similar design. But I do find it interesting to see what machines they are comparing to. There's obviously no A4000 or A1200, but they have included an XT class computer. Now the first demo is for Parasol Stars, a single screen arcade game that, well, never actually came from the arcades. Now this was more of a take on Bubble Bubble than Rainbow Islands, despite how it looks, as it uses the characters from the second game. But now we have to use our umbrella to grab the bad guys and then throw them. Now these can then hit others and knock them about, but you'll still have to grab those and take them down as well. This is a delightful game. Now the only downside in this demo is that it's just 4 levels, and you will just breeze through them in no time at all. But you might be able to try out a few of the tactics, like building out a large bubble on the top of your umbrella and using that to attack multiple enemies at once. Their final demo was for Indie Heat, and where the previous game felt like it might have come from the arcades but didn't, this one does. And much like the previous game, this is a single screen one, but it's a racing game, and it's quite a nice looking game with some detailed artwork and gameplay to match. And while the course itself might be very basic, you're going to have to pay attention, as you have things like fuel, that if it runs out, well, you're pretty much going to come last. And in a surprise twist, even the AI have to pit to fill up, and you can bash them away so they can't pit themselves. Now this is a fun game and seems to be a decent conversion. Now the demo is a bit slight with just this track, with no music or sound effects, but I do think it gives you a good idea of what you can expect from the full thing. We get a rare sighting of Amiga Mania, that short-lived title that continued down the path of Amiga fun with a full free game on its cover. But this one lasted even less time, with barely a year, where they only managed to release 8 magazines, and what we get here is Ramses, that also got released on a few of the other magazines as well. Now in this game you can play against multiple people, where you'll have to take it in turns, as you have to build the most impressive pyramid possible, as we are expecting to die on our 57th birthday. Now to be able to pull this all off, we're going to need building materials, which will cost gold, and that will also require boats to transport it around. But you also require food, as everyone has to be fed. Which means that this is actually a relatively interesting simulation style game. But it does suffer a little from not being immediately obvious what it is you need to do, or how to do anything. It doesn't help that the only manual that I could find for the game was in German, even the on-disc one was only available in German. And when I tried to translate it, well, it wasn't all that great. Although the in-game translations aren't amazing either. Now I think if you put the time in and worked out how to really play the game, then I think it would be a very interesting title. But I can see how many people might have bounced off it, and why it might have been difficult for them to find a publisher for it. And our last magazine for this year is the one for Amiga, that had a few demos. That included the exact same demo for Parasol Stars. And while that plays, I want to say a big thank you to everyone that's archived these cover discs over the years, as there would be no episodes without them. And this magazine almost didn't make it, as I couldn't find an archived copy of this game anywhere. Now this isn't the first time this has happened, and I've had to skip a few magazines over the years because of this problem. I've even attempted to try and track down some of these discs myself to archive them, but in this instance I couldn't even do that. So I had to turn to the English Amiga board, and they came to my rescue. So a massive thanks to them for allowing this part of the episode to go ahead. And with that done, let's move on to the second demo, which is for Space Crusade. That gives us the first mission in the game, where we have to take the Blood Angels into the ship and find and destroy the Dreadnought. A significantly easier said than done task, as there are a significant number of monsters in our way. Now we'll have to move each of our members in turn, before then giving the enemy their own turn. Now the action takes place in a top-down view, and then in a 3D isometric style for the combat. That is extremely nicely done. The graphics are really nicely done. The combat, I swear it should be impossible for me to roll this many zeros in a row. Now even though this is just the first level, it would have kept me going for absolutely ages, as I've played this mission so many times and rarely do I get to complete it. But every time I do have a lot of fun. We jump to 1994, where we have a single magazine to check out, the always interesting CD32 Gamer, and this was actually its very first issue, where they clearly wanted to make a good first impression, as they had a number of demos as well as their usual PD. And let's start with Alfred Chicken. It's everyone's favourite chicken in the same demo that we've seen multiple times. And it is just the first level, and it is a little bit basic. Now, you have to find the balloons and release them. And if you want additional points bonuses, then you can go after the gems. But don't worry, this isn't a collect 'em up, so you don't have to collect them if you don't want to. Now this does do a few cool things, like you can go through doors, and you can press switches. But that musical loop, it will just burn its way into your brain in the short amount of time it will take you to finish this one level. Nick Faldo's Golf. A nice looking golf game that looks like it's actually using the power of the CD machine. But annoyingly, even though we have a cursor, it doesn't look like it supports the mouse. You'll have to play with the controller. Thankfully, it's not the worst. Now, when you're in the main game, you can select the clubs on your left and get additional information on the right. Then eventually, you'll want to move the cursor down to the bottom of the screen where you can start the swing. And it has the pretty much standard 3-tap system.
Gotta take the rough for the smooth.
Even if the zone to try and get a decent shot is extremely small. And as you go, you'll also get some voice samples from Jim, who for the most part was really annoying as they kept telling me I was bad at the game, which was true, but they didn't need to rub it in.
You seem to be having a rough time.
Degeneration is next, and this is based on the first level of the game, and the CD edition is the updated 256 colour version of the final title. But the gameplay is still exactly the same with this isometric adventure where we have to move around, pressing buttons, avoiding the weird looking enemies, as well as trying to save the people. All while trying to find items that will make everything a little bit easier, like the laser gun. Now this is one serious courier that's taking on all of this lot just to deliver his package, as most of the ones I've met, well, they would have thrown it under a bin and left a note saying they couldn't deliver. Donk the Samurai Duck. A favourite game of mine, and the CD32 edition was really interesting. Even in this demo we have that dance track CD music and the animated cutscenes. And the levels that we get, well, it's based on much later in the game. Which means we're going to have to collect a lot of gems. A huge number of gems. As this is a great example of that Euro collect 'em up platformer that we've all come to know and love. Where we'll have to get all the gems if we want to finish the level, and some of them are well hidden. So you got to make use of the map and your other abilities that you'll find along the way to try and get them. Now this being based on the AGA version of the original game, it gets all those extra backgrounds and other effects all enabled by default. In fact, there's no option to turn them off. Trolls. This is the sister game to what most people got with their CD32, Oscar, as they were both built on the same engine. But now, you get to play as those weird troll plastic creatures that were all the rage in the 90s. Much like Oscar, you have to find a set number of items in a level to be able to exit, and in this instance, it's baby trolls. So again, we have a collect 'em up. It's just that the controls do not feel as good as they should, with you feeling very sticky when you jump and land. Now outside of jumping on the enemies and having to do that multiple times to take out even the most basic of enemy, we also have the yo-yo that you can use to attack them. But what should have been an extremely interesting mechanic, in that you could use it to grab onto parts of the background and swing around, is extremely difficult to get it to work right. It felt more luck than skill. The only thing really going for this one is the really bouncy, upbeat music. and it seems that they have always included PD games on these CDs, and there's a few interesting ones to check out, like Atoms. Now this has to be one of my favourite PD games that I might have become a little obsessed with. Now in this version we get a 4-player game, where you have to place the atoms on the grid in either empty squares or on top of your own. And when the amounts grow too large in a single square, they will explode, sending those atoms flying to the ones around them. And you can use this to take over the other player's squares, as well as get chain reactions going. This is a great game, but it is multiplayer only, and I always had difficulties trying to find people to play against. But this is still absolutely awesome. Insectoids 2, a fun if basic single screen shoot 'em up, where the enemies come flying in to form up before attacking you, which does give you a chance to whittle down those numbers before they start lobbing firepower at you. But thankfully this isn't as basic as it first appears, as if you take out the UFO, then you'll get a chance to upgrade your firepower. Now overall I think it looks nice and it plays well enough. Mega Ball AGA. One of the best Arkanoid style games around is here in shareware form, with a whole bunch of levels and power-ups for you to deal with sound effects ripped from one of the other great examples of the genre, Krypton Egg. Now manage to clear out all the tiles and you get to go on to the next level, where you'll have to deal with all sorts of interesting tile types. They might explode, they might grow, you'll just have to play to find out. Now this is an incredibly inventive take on the genre and it is a lot of fun. But if you are playing this on the CD32, well, you better make sure you've got a mouse connected. We move on to our final year with 1995, and the first magazine is Amiga Format. That went with the classic 2-disc setup, and the first one having a special version of Wordsworth, the AFC edition, aka the Amiga Format cover disc version. Now this was a cut down edition of Wordsworth 3.1, so it's not quite the full thing, but it is more useful than a demo, as you can actually load and save anything you write. It is locked into Wordsworth's own format, which limits where else you can load the files, and you can only run it from the cover disk. There's no hard drive installation or even booting from another disk, so it is a little limited in those ways. But even with all of that, you can still edit the files with pretty much most of the features of the full program, though stuff like spell checker is out, or any other tools that required loading in from disk. But don't worry, as you could either upgrade to the special edition of the special edition for another 15 quid, or you can get the full program for £35. And after all that, well, the actual program is, well, I guess a bit boring, as it is just a very well done word processor with all the fonts, justifying, text formatting that you'd expect. Now one cool thing that it does have is an autocorrect, that you can load in common mistakes and have it fix it for you. Moving on to the demos, and the first is for Bubble and Squeak. This is a multi-level demo, and it is for such a charming game. And interestingly, this demo is for the regular Amiga, as the original game targeted the AGA hardware first, with this port coming later, which wasn't all that common. Now this actually resulted in some differences, as they heard the complaints about things like the controls and fixed them up, or at least made them a little bit better. So if you were an AGA owner, you had the choice of either the better looking version or the slightly better playing version. As one of the things they did change was to make it much easier to call Squeak to you and have him do some of the actions that was required, and just generally moving around the level was made a bit better. Now thankfully this game is not a collect 'em up, so any items that you see are mostly for points, apart from the coins, Those are useful as you can put them into the gumball machines and that will let you give Squeak some gum. And obviously, don't feed gum to your large cat-like creatures. But if you do that, it will allow you to mount them, and then you can move around and get to other areas that you couldn't before. All while you're just trying to make it to the exit. This is a fun game and a lovely demo. Kingpin Bowling. No guesses what this one is based on, but it is a very nice take on the sport, as you can freely set your power by pushing up and down, and then you can position your player. The gaming part comes in with the direction that you throw the ball, as you'll get an arrow that's bouncing back and forth. And trying to line that up just nicely is critical. And once the ball reaches the end of the lane, it switches to a close-up view. And between that and the inclusion of all the little animations like the pin setters and everything, this is a really nicely done game. But with this being a demo, don't expect to be able to play an entire game. And what do we have here? It's another See You Amiga. That was a little bit more grown up at this point, so no music or picture of the month. But they did give away Movie Setter, a full application. And this is a package for making animations, but it's less about drawing each frame, and it's more about a timeline where you can import backgrounds, sets, and other animations that you've made elsewhere, and then put them together for your final animated movie. Which makes it easier to reuse animations, but also make simple tweaks to what you've already done. And they also provided a whole bunch of clip art on another disc, with backgrounds, sounds and animations to get you going. It's a nice bit of software, and I could see it being really useful for making those more detailed movies. The problem was though, they'd already given this away back in September of 1992. So it really does feel like they're just recycling software at this point. And where they had multiple pages in the magazine going over it last time, now it's just 2, with a manual on the disc. Their demo for the month was FIFA International Soccer. Now this was the first FIFA game, and was a bit of a big deal at the time, more so on the consoles. But the Amiga also got their own version. But it was clearly aimed at those consoles, as they expected you to use either a multi-button joystick or use the keyboard keys as well. Now the big thing about this game was its level of presentation and style at the time, and that pitch with its isometric style view was different at the time. But even with this 3D view, it didn't lose out in its playability. Even if I'm not the person to be really talking about football games. I've lost more games of that Sensible Soccer demo than I can count. But this does seem like a decent port of the game, even if it is a little slow in places. But I can't remember how the console versions fared. And our final magazine for the month is another CD32 Gamer. This time it's issue 11, and there isn't too much in the way of demos on this CD. What they did have was one of their go-to ones, that I swear I've played more of on their CDs than any other. It's Base Jumpers. And what can I say about this game and demo that I've not said before? You have to work your way up the building, collecting the icons and pressing buttons, all while either avoiding or trying to take out the guards. And if you happen to have some friends, you can all play at the same time, tripping each other up and trying to cause each other's difficulties because you're all trying to get to the top first. And that is where the real game comes in, as you have to jump off the top of the building and then base jump your way down, with the goal being to survive as well as being the first one to land on the ground, by being the very last person to open up their parachute. Whiz, an isometric style platformer where you have to guide the rabbit around while jumping and attacking or avoiding the enemies. Now along the way you'll find buttons and keys that will open up new areas, and I think the game has a pretty nice looking style to it. The controls, as you can imagine, do take a little bit to get used to, but that tends to be an issue with these types of games. Now as you go along you'll collect good mushrooms that will increase your health, but you'll also want to try and avoid the dodgy looking ones as they have the opposite effect. Which does seem like a mean addition to the game, and I swear I got far more of the dodgy looking ones than the good ones. But overall, this seems fun and colourful, and for the most part, actually quite playable. Although I'm not too sure about the long-term playability of it. There were a few times in the demo where I wasn't sure if I was going in the right direction, or if I was being blocked by the demo itself, or just not doing something great. The final demo is for Super League Manager, a football management sim that really went out of its way to look like you are being in charge. With this very icon-driven design, all the way to this handwritten style font that I can barely read. And look at this, you can even drink the coffee or water the plants. Oh yeah, and you'll have to answer the phone. Now all this presentation and having to tick over days does make the game feel a bit longer than others. And after picking your team, you'll eventually get to the match, which is presented in the slowest, possibly the most boring way I think I've ever seen. And amazingly, my ability to be bad at football games means that I ended up with a draw. Now this does feel like an interesting take on the whole football manager genre, but it just didn't work for me. Let's do our usual roundup of PD and a few videos. And we start off with Xenix. That feels like what you'd get if you made asteroids look nicer, but then removed all the things that actually made it good. Like the momentum of the craft, or rocks breaking up into smaller bits. Now as you go, some of the later rocks do actually break apart, but not quite as you'd expect. And they take so many multiple hits to actually take out. This isn't quite Stardust. And it's time for global thermonuclear warfare, which I hope is not reminiscent in any way. Now in this, we'll take it in turns to fire missiles from various silos and subs to attack the other player. Now you'll get to select which of the silos you want to fire from, and then set the direction and elevation. Thus at first you'll probably be guesstimating where they're going to land, as you're going to try and take out their bunkers, cities and factories. Now this is clearly inspired by various movies like war games, and has that look about it. Now it is an interesting take on the aim and power style game, but it does have a few unique takes of its own, such as one of the cities will house the HQ of that side, and if you take that out, then you win. Or you've got the factories that will be slowly generating new ammo for the silos, as they have limited amounts at any one time. And let's end this episode with a classic Eric Schwartz animation, as they included a whole range of them on the CD. And there we have it, a slightly different episode to the normal XLs, as we have been working our way through all the best magazines, and now we've just got to try and look at what's left. So what were my top 3 items? Well, in third place, I'm going to give it to Parasol Stars. It's a cool take on Bubble Bubble and Rainbow Islands, but it's a little bit more interesting based on its history, and this was a great conversion, if it was an incredibly short demo. In second place, Donk. I've always had a soft spot for this game, and the CD32 version is nice. I always liked that it had far more changes than most CD editions of games that you tended to find. And in first place, well, it had to be Space Crusade. This is a demo that I could have played for ages, and I would have had fun every single time. Possibly too much fun, as this might have been more than enough for me. And before I go, a massive thank you to my amazing Patreons, who not only got to see this video a whole week early, but they also got to see it advert free. And they got to see their name on screen, and if you'd like to join them, you can do so for free. And obviously, I have to thank you the viewer for getting this far. And until next time, I was the Goldfish, that was for the Emperor, and this was Goldfish on Games.